So in this section, we're going to talk about experimenting with the 3DG settings safely, so you don't screw things up too bad. Actually, you can screw things up as much as you want, but with this method, at least you'll be able to get back to the way you were. So let's go into Unity. Now in Unity, I have this mesh, and on this mesh, I have, where is it? My grass render. I have this 3DG rough, no low lines, lush assigned to it. And if I highlight that, I can see I get this lush and this lush 3DG material here. And then here are all the settings that go along with that. There's a ton of stuff in here, okay? And I'm not going to explain what all these settings are, but I'm going to show you how to set up to experiment with these settings and do a couple different things. So, first of all, to experiment safely, we never want to make changes to an original material, because if we make changes and we forget what we did, then we can't get back to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this rough, no mow lines lush material. I'm going to hit Control D, and it's going to make a perfect exact copy of it. And when I do that, I can rename it. Let's just rename this to something like delete me, because I'm going to get rid of it when we're done. And I highlight my material. Now what I can do is I can take this delete me lush material and I can drop it in and replace the other one. And you can see that when I did that, it didn't change the grass because it's an exact copy of the one that I had in there, right? And let's start experimenting with this stuff. Now what I can do is I can either come back to this lush delete me over here and open it up and see all these settings, or within the inspector of the mesh itself, I can expand this section and I can get to the same settings. Now in here, there's a bunch of different things, and we could spend a lot of time on this, but I find the best way to do this is experiment, and also let me give you some guidelines here. When you do your 3DG, okay, the best approach is to have your grass match your underlying mesh as closely as possible. And in this case, the defaults are pretty darn good. But maybe, you want to change the color to match your course a little better. You want to make things browner, lighter, greener, bluer, whatever. And you want to change some of these things. So you can do this safely, because since we created a copy of this, now I can go in here and tweak all this stuff, and I can always get back to this original lush texture in here. But you can see, for one of my recommendations was make it match. If I come back up to the grass renderer here and I turn it off, this 3DG really does match that texture underneath. And I would, recommend you kind of stick to that same methodology, which is have the 3DG and both color and kind of length and texture match your mesh underneath there. But you still have to change it, if you want to, do something different underneath there. So what can we do? Well, we've got grass type. We can actually do multiple different textures of grass. If you change this to something like 3, which is actually what this 3 texture lush is here, you actually get additional options down here to tweak other different grass textures, and it's going to essentially mix these together to give you like different colors of grasses. I'm not going to experiment with that now. You can always turn on the 3 texture lush 3DG material and put that in there if you want to see what that looks like. Vertex density, the density mode, if we get into some vertex painting, we can actually use vertex painting to change the density and do some bare areas on the grass. I probably will at some point make a couple of videos on how to do that. More of an advanced topic though. But we have this option. One of the big things here is this target density. And we have to be very careful here. So if I lower this target density, normally it would increase the density in the grass here, but it isn't because of a particular setting that we have or don't have enabled. So let's change this back to about 0.6 to where it was. And if I scroll all the way back here at the top in my nature mesh filter area script, and I normalize triangle sizes, this is going to have significant impacts on our performance, but if you want much more dense grass, you essentially might have to turn this on. So I turn that on. You can immediately see that I get a lot more density here. And now when I go down to my target density, if I start lowering this, my 3D grass gets really dense, but you got to be really careful here, guys. This will kill your performance, okay? So you might just want to change that. You can move it back the other direction, make it less dense. So I'm going to put this right about there. And so that's about actually a 0.6. That should 0.06. That should be actually okay. These all have to do with rendering distances, level of detail scale. You can slide these in and out and play with those and see what they do. But be careful, because if you send your 3D grass out even further, and if you see my mouse, this is about how far it's rendering out right now. And you can see my LOD end up here. I don't know if I change this to 5, if we're going to see that or not. I don't see that. I don't know if that's the setting I'm looking off. Density, fall off, power. There it goes. If I lower that off, you can see that it renders out a little bit farther. So there's my LOD start, LOD max. Let's see here. Does that change it? Nope. Grass fade start, grass fade end. Let's see, change this to 30, see what happens. Yeah, that begins to change it. So you can see when I lower that, you can see my grass is now only rendering right about here, about 5 meters out. And I can change that back out to, I think it was about at 40 before. Seems about right. You can change those. Just be aware that it can really impact your performance. So if you're new, I would watch your performance and don't mess with those too much. But again, we have this duplicate that we're playing with, so if we mess it up, we can always go back. Big thing I think to be aware of are these grass types down here, which is essentially your colors. So here you can see my color, and if I go and I start changing this, you can see I start changing my grass colors. And this is where we got to be really careful. Obviously this is way too neon, but if I start to make it like dark and not match the underlying texture, you can see that this is not right. There's something just not right about this. I got these dark pieces over here. So again, it should match the underlying texture. So if I Control Z to get back, this looks pretty good because the colors are matching the underlying texture. Okay, but that's these settings here. And then if I would have like multiple grass textures, these all would be enabled. And that's what the 3 texture is all about. And there things get really complicated because now you're dealing with 3 different types of grass blades. 3 grass blades all have like these separate color tweaks you can do. So you can see things can get complicated pretty quick. Oh, and also we have height and width. And these actually, believe it or not, do not impact your performance. Well, you got to be careful on how wide you make these things. Control Z. These are very touchy, so I can make my grass a little bit wider. So let me change this to C like 2. So now you can see how wide that gets. Changing the width and height of your grasses actually does not impact performance because it's still the same number of triangles. They're just stretched out different means. So let's change this back to like, I think that was 0.9, looks about right. I can change my height and you can see that's the max height. If I change my min height to the same, now it's all tall like that. And then I can do is I can change my my weight and my softness. So I can make the grass softer so it lays down a little bit more. And now I can make it really stiff so it's straight up in the air. So it's just how much it bends. And I can change, I'm having a hard time. I've never gotten the weight to work too. Let's see if I change the softness and the weight. Yeah, never had much luck with the weight for some reason. Getting that grass to like bend or something. If I do soft, it's way down or soft way up, higher weight. Yeah, I've never understood the weight. So if someone else figures that one out, let me know. We can play with the softness here. But the key thing is just do what I do, which is make a copy of this and experiment.